cold here is not merely a temperature. It is a living weight that presses through the stone walls of the abbey, seeking the warmth of my marrow. It is the first thing I know before I even open my eyes. It is a damp, salty cold, born of the sea that surrounds us, rising from the great gray tides that isolate this mount from the rest of Christendom. I lie still for a moment, listening to the wind battering the slate roof above the dormitory. It howls like a lost soul denied entry to heaven. My body is curled tight beneath a single rough wool blanket, my knees drawn up to my chest to preserve the fading heat of sleep. Beneath me, the straw mattress is thin and compressed. I can feel the ridges of the wooden boards of the bed frame digging into my hip. The straw smells of old dust and dried fields, a stark contrast to the scent of brine and wet stone that permeates every inch of Mont-Saint-Michel. A bell tolls. It is the bell for Matins. It is deep, resonant, and commands obedience. It vibrates through the floorboards, shaking the dust from the rafters. Around me, the darkness is absolute, save for the faint, guttering glow of a single tallow candle near the dormitory entrance. The sound of rustling straw fills the long room as 40 other brothers rise in unison. There are no groans of protest, no whispers of fatigue. There is only the sound of 40 wool blankets being pushed aside, and 40 pairs of feet finding the freezing floorboards. I sit up. The air in the dormitory is thick with the smell of sleep, the sourness of unwashed bodies, the stale breath of men who have fasted, and the damp wool of our habits. We sleep in our clothes, as the rule of Saint Benedict dictates, ready to rise immediately for the work of God. My tunic, which I have worn for 3 days and nights, clings to my skin. It is made of undyed wool, coarse and scratchy, a constant reminder of the penance of this life. I swing my legs over the side of the bed. My feet touch the floor, and the shock of the cold sends a shiver racing up my spine. I fumble in the dark for my night shoes, soft leather slippers that offer little protection against the chill, but are silent on the stone. I find them and slide my feet inside, the leather stiff and cold against my skin. There is no time for vanity, and barely time for wakefulness. I stand and smooth down my tunic. It falls to my ankles, heavy and thick. Over this, I adjust my scapular, the long strip of cloth that hangs down my front and back, the apron of my service. I tighten the leather belt around my waist. It is old and cracked, the buckle brass and tarnished. I ensure my knife is secure in its sheath attached to the belt. A monk must always be ready, even if his only enemy today is a dull quill or a stubborn piece of parchment. We file out of the dormitory in silence. The only sound is the soft scuffing of leather on wood and the rhythmic breathing of the brethren. we descend the night stairs. These are treacherous, steep stone steps that spiral down into the bowels of the church. The stone is worn smooth by centuries of sandals and slippers. I run my hand along the cold wall to steady myself. The stone is wet with condensation. The abbey breathes the sea. The salt air crystallizes on the masonry, making the walls weep. We enter the choir. The darkness here is vast, cavernous. The high vaulted ceilings are lost in shadow. A few candles flicker near the altar, casting long, dancing shadows against the pillars. The smell of beeswax and old incense hangs in the air, sweet and heavy, masking the scent of the sea for a brief moment. We take our places in the wooden stalls. The wood is polished smooth by the habits of the men who sat here before me, men who are now buried in the crypts below. We chant. The sound is low at first, a collective hum that rises into the vaulted ceiling. We sing the psalms of the morning. My voice is raspy, my throat dry. I can see my breath misting in the air before me as I sing. The cold in the church is more intense than in the dormitory. It is a stillness that seeps into the bones. I shift my weight from one foot to the other, trying to keep the blood flowing. But I do not break the rhythm of the chant. We are the clock of the world. Our prayers keep the sun moving and the tides turning. After the offices of Matins and lauds are finished, the sky outside the high windows is still black. The sun has not yet crested the horizon of Normandy. The silence returns, heavier now. It is time for the morning hygiene, such as it is. We move to the cloister. The wind here is fierce, whipping around the open arcade. In the center is the lavabo, a great stone basin filled with water. The water is freezing, likely drawn from the cisterns that collect the rain. I roll up the sleeves of my habit. The wool is heavy and stiff, resisting the fold. I dip my hands into the water. It bites like fire. I scrub my hands together, the friction offering a fleeting warmth. I splash the water onto my face, rubbing the sleep from my eyes and the grease from my forehead. The shock wakes me fully, sharpening my senses. I do not have soap this morning. Soap is a luxury reserved for washing clothes or for the infirmary. I rely on the water and the roughness of a linen towel to clean my skin. I dry my hands on the communal towel hanging from a ring on the wall. The linen is damp and smells of mildew. I then reach into my pocket for a small piece of woolen cloth and rub my teeth and gums. It tastes of wool and nothing else. Some of the brothers chew on fennel seeds or twigs of hazel to freshen their breath, but I have none today. I return to the dormitory briefly to change my shoes. I remove the soft night slippers and pull on my day shoes. These are sturdier, made of thick cowhide with heavy soles, designed to grip the slick stones of the mount. I wrap strips of wool around my calves, securing them with garters to protect my legs from the drafts that snake across the floor of the scriptorium. Now the hunger begins to make itself known. It is a hollow ache in the center of my stomach. The rule is strict about fasting, but because my work in the scriptorium requires a steady hand and sharp focus, and because the winter air burns energy rapidly, I am permitted a mixtum, a modest morning intake to sustain strength. I walk to the refectory. It is a long, high-ceilinged hall smelling of wood smoke and stale bread. Long wooden tables line the walls. I take my place. There is no conversation. Silence is the vessel in which we carry God's word, and we do not spill it casually. If I need salt, I must signal with my hands. If I need the jug, I must make the sign for drink. A novice places a wooden bowl and a clay cup before me. The meal is simple. In the bowl is a hunk of bread, perhaps the size of my fist. It is black bread, a maslin loaf made from a mixture of rye and wheat. It is dense, heavy, and days old. The crust is hard enough to crack a tooth if one is not careful. I break off a piece. The crumb inside is tight and gray. It smells of yeast and earth. I dip the hard bread into the cup. The cup holds ale weak, watery ale, barely fermented. It is not for pleasure. It is for survival. The water on the mount is often brackish or stagnant, so the ale is safer. It is sour and thin, but it softens the bread. I chew slowly. The texture is coarse, like wet sand, but as it breaks down, the faint sweetness of the grain releases. I focus on the sensation of swallowing, feeling the food travel down to settle the ache in my belly. It is not enough to be full, but it is enough to stop the trembling of my hands. That is all that matters. A trembling hand ruins parchment, and parchment is worth more than a monk's comfort. I finish the last crumb, sweeping it from the table into my palm and tossing it into my mouth. Nothing is wasted. I drain the last drop of ale, the sediment gritty against my tongue. I rise, bow to the crucifix on the wall, and leave the refectory. The sun is finally hinting at its arrival. The sky to the east, over the bay, is turning the color of a bruised plum. The tide is out, revealing the vast, glistening mudflats that surround the island. From this height, the mud looks like hammered silver. I make my way to the scriptorium. This is my battlefield. It is located on the north side of the cloister to catch the even, cool light that does not glare or shift as violently as the southern sun. The room is large and smells intensely of ink, gall, parchment, and binding. Glue, a sharp, chemical, organic smell that I have come to associate with holiness. The room is cold. Fire is dangerous here. A single spark could destroy months of labor and centuries of knowledge. There are no hearths. We rely on heated stones placed at our feet or balls of hot metal placed in special warming devices. But this early in the morning, the heat has long since dissipated. I go to my desk. It is a steeply angled wooden lectern, worn smooth by my own elbows over the last 10 years. My tools are waiting for me. I sit on the backless wooden stool. It forces my spine straight, a posture I must maintain for the next 4 hours until the midday meal. First, I must prepare the surface. I take a sheet of vellum that was stretched and dried by the parchment makers yesterday. It is calfskin, pale and creamy, but it is not yet ready for the holy words. It has a hair side and a flesh side. The flesh side is smooth, but the hair side still holds the ghost of the animal's coat. I pick up a piece of pumice stone, porous and light gray. I begin to rub the surface of the vellum in small, circular motions. The sound is a dry, rasping scritch-scritch. I must be firm enough to remove the tiny imperfections and grease spots that would cause the ink to run, but gentle enough not to tear the skin. I blow away the fine white dust that rises from the skin. It coats my throat, dry and chalky. Next, I take my knife. It is a small, curved blade, kept razor sharp. I inspect my quill. It is a goose feather, harvested from the left wing so that it curves naturally away from my hand. The tip has softened from yesterday's work. I place the quill on a small block of hardwood. With a precise, practiced motion, I slice the tip at an angle, then a second slice to create the nib. Finally, a tiny slit up the center to hold the ink. The sound of the knife slicing the hollow quill is a sharp crack. I test the flexibility against my thumbnail. It must yield, but snap back instantly. Now the ink. I reach for the inkhorn tied to the side of my desk. I stir the mixture with a small stick. It is iron gall ink, made from the galls of oak trees, mixed with vitriol and gum arabic. It smells acidic, like vinegar and old rust. It is currently a pale gray-brown, but as it dries on the page and oxidizes with the air, it will turn a deep, indelible black. The project before me is a copy of The City of God by St. Augustine. I am on book 12. The master scribe has already ruled the page for me, creating a grid of tiny pinpricks down the sides to mark the lines, connected by faint plummet lines made of lead. These are the tracks my train of thought must follow. I dip the quill. I do not plunge it deep. I let the surface tension of the ink kiss the nib. I tap the excess against the rim of the horn. I lean forward. My nose is only inches from the parchment. The light from the window is gray and weak, but sufficient. I can hear the wind whistling through the leaded glass panes, a high-pitched keen. My breath is slow and shallow. I cannot exhale heavily while I write, or the moisture of my breath might dampen the parchment. I touch the quill to the skin. The first letter is a capital D. Deus. God. The sensation is specific. The vellum has a velvet-like drag, unlike the slickness of paper. The quill scratches, snagging slightly on the microscopic fibers of the skin. I pull the stroke down, thick, heavy, authoritative. I lift, twist the nib slightly, and make the hairline stroke, thin, delicate, whispering. Deus. My hand moves with a rhythm drilled into me since I was a boy oblate. Dip, tap, stroke, lift. Dip, tap, stroke, lift. The ink flows wet and glistening. It looks alive. My fingers are already cold. The chill from the room seeps into the joints of my knuckles. In an hour, they will ache. In 2 hours, they will be stiff claws. I will have to stop and sit on my hands to warm them. But for now, they are fluid. I write the first sentence. Deus itac, natura mutabilis, fecit res mutabiles. God, therefore, unchangeable nature, made changeable things. The irony is not lost on me. I am a changeable thing, shivering in a drafty room, aging, my eyesight slowly dimming with every winter, transcribing words about the unchangeable and eternal. I hear the scratching of other quills around me. It sounds like mice scurrying in the walls. We are a machine of production. Brother Thomas to my left is grinding pigments for an illumination. I hear the rhythmic clack grind of his pestle in the mortar. He is crushing lapis lazuli brought from the Far East, turning stone into the robe of the Virgin Mary. The smell of the binding agent, glaire, made from egg whites, wafts over to me. It smells faintly sulfurous. A drop of ink threatens to pool at the tip of my quill. I pause, holding my breath, tilting the pen back to let gravity pull the liquid away from the danger zone. A blot here would mean scraping the skin down with a knife, ruining the pristine surface. The drop recedes. I exhale. I continue. The work is physical. It is not merely writing. It is carving. I must press down to make the ink bite into the skin. My shoulder begins to tighten. The muscles in my neck, already stiff from the cold night, form a hard knot at the base of my skull. This is the scribe's burden. We do not plow the fields with oxen. We plow the divine fields with our pens. Our sweat is not on our brow, but in the cramping of our fingers and the straining of our eyes. The sun rises higher, though unseen behind the gray wool of the clouds. The light in the scriptorium shifts from charcoal to the color of dirty milk. I stop to sharpen my quill again. The tip dulls quickly on the rough skin. Slice, crack, a fresh point. I look at my hands. They are stained with spots of black ink and the gray dust of pumice. The skin is chapped from the salt wind and the cold water. These are the hands of a laborer. I dip the pen again. The world outside the window is chaos. tides rushing in at the speed of a galloping horse, wind tearing at the shutters, seagulls crying out in hunger. But here, on this square of calfskin, there is order, there is straightness, there is meaning. I place the nib down. The friction of the quill vibrates up my arm. I lose myself in the geometry of the letters. The cold floor, the hard stool, the taste of the sour ale, it all fades into the background. There is only the ink, the skin, and the word. I am awake. I am fed. I am working. The day has begun. The sun has finally crested the high walls of the abbey, piercing the narrow, arched windows of the scriptorium. This is the golden hour, not for its color, but for its utility. We follow the light. As the beam creeps across the slanted oak of my desk, I shift my posture, aligning the heavy sheet of parchment to catch the maximum illumination without casting a shadow with my own hand. The scriptorium is a place of suspended breath. The only sounds are the scratching of quills, the shuffle of wool on stone, and the distant, rhythmic battering of the sea against the granite base of the Mont. My task for this midday block is the application of gold leaf to the capital letter Q, the start of the quonium. This is delicate, treacherous work. The parchment, made from the skin of a calf, has already been prepared. It feels cool and stiff under my fingertips. The hair side slightly rougher than the flesh side, though we have scraped it with a lunellum knife until it is nearly uniform. I reach for the small pot of bowl. This is a reddish clay, ground into a fine dust, and mixed with glare, the water that drains from whipped egg whites. It smells faintly sulfurous, a smell of decay that underpins the creation of holy beauty. Using a brush made of only a few squirrel hairs, I paint the bowl onto the parchment, filling the outline of the letter. I must build it up, layer by layer, waiting for each to dry. It creates a raised cushion, a three-dimensional foundation that will make the gold leap from the page. While the bowl dries, I tend to my other tools. Order is the first rule of the monastic life. On the shelf above my desk sits my inkhorn, tied with leather thongs. Beside it are the pigments: minium for the red, lapis lazuli ground from stones brought from the far east for the blue, and verdigris for the green. I check the consistency of the ink. It is oak gall ink, acidic and biting. It smells of vinegar and iron. If it sits too long, it thickens, becoming sludge. I add 3 drops of water and stir it with a small birch stick, watching the black swirl into the purple. The bowl is ready. Now comes the moment of highest tension. I open the small book of gold leaf. The metal is beaten so thin it behaves more like a liquid or a vapor than a solid. If I breathe too heavily, the square of gold will lift into the air and be lost to the drafts of the room. I pick up the gilder's knife, its blade flat and wide. I slide it under a leaf of gold, lifting it gently. I hold my breath. My lungs burn, but I do not exhale. I bring the gold over the raised clay letter. Then I lean in close and breathe a warm, humid huff of air onto the clay. The moisture in my breath reactivates the glare in the clay, making it sticky for just a few seconds. Quickly, I flip the gold onto the clay. It adheres instantly. Now I can breathe. The air rushes back into my chest, loud in the silence of the room. Brother Thomas, 2 desks down, shifts his weight, his sandals scuffing the floor, but he does not look up. We are alone together. The gold looks dull, flat, and wrinkled. It looks nothing like the glory of God. To transform it, I take up the burnisher. This is a tool set with the long, curved tooth of a dog, polished to a high sheen. I begin to rub the gold. I press down hard. The sensation is smooth, waxy friction. I rub in small circles. Slowly, the wrinkles vanish. The dullness retreats. The gold begins to shine. It catches the midday sun streaming through the window and throws a blinding spark back into my eye. It is done. It looks like molten metal poured onto the skin of the calf. I set the tools aside and pick up the quill. The illumination is the glory, but the text is the duty. I am copying a commentary on the Gospel of Luke. The script is the transitional style, moving away from the rounded Carolingian of our grandfathers toward the sharper, more angular Gothic that is becoming the standard. It requires a rigid wrist. I dip the goose feather into the horn. I shake it once to clear the excess. I place the nib on the line we have pricked and ruled with lead plummet. Downstroke, lift, cross stroke, lift. Writing is an act of violence against the body. There is a saying among us: 3 fingers hold the pen, but the whole body toils. My thumb, index, and middle finger are locked in a claw-like grip around the quill. The pressure travels up my forearm, which aches with a dull, throbbing heat. It settles in the shoulder, which is hunched forward to protect the page. My back is a curved bow, stiff and unyielding. And there is the cold. Even at midday, the stone of the abbey sucks the warmth from the air. My feet, clad in thick wool socks and leather sandals, feel like blocks of ice against the flagstones. We wear fingerless gloves to keep the blood flowing in our hands, but the tips of my fingers are white and numb. I stop every few lines to blow warm air into my cupped hands, rubbing them together to restore sensation. The sound of the scriptorium is a texture in itself. It is the scratch, scratch, scratch of 20 nibs biting into parchment. It is the rustle of turning pages. It is the scrape of a knife erasing an error. I make a mistake. My mind wanders for a fraction of a second to the hunger gnawing at my stomach, and I write spiritus where I should have written sanctus. I freeze. The error stares at me, black and accusing. There is no erasing rubber here. I take the penknife in my left hand. I must scrape the ink off the surface of the skin. I scratch gently. The sound is like a mouse chewing on dry wood. I scrape until the black is gone, and the pale cream of the vellum shows through. I take a piece of pumice stone and rub the spot to smooth the fibers I have raised. I take a boar's tooth and burnish the spot smooth again. Only then can I write the correct word. The sun moves. The shadows lengthen. The ache in my back becomes a sharp line of fire. I yearn for the bell, and then it rings. The bronze bell high in the tower tolls. The sound vibrates through the stone walls, physically shaking the air in the room. It is sexed the midday office. The reaction is immediate. 20 monks stop mid-stroke. We wipe our nibs on cloth scraps. We cap our inkhorns. We cover our pages with protective cloths. To leave the word of God exposed to dust or sunlight is a sin of negligence. We rise. My knees crack loud in the quiet. I stretch my spine, feeling the vertebrae pop and realign. We form a line, hands hidden in our wide sleeves, hoods pulled up. We process out of the scriptorium, down the spiral stairs of stone that are worn smooth by centuries of sandals. We enter the church. The nave is vast and dim, smelling of incense and damp stone. We stand in our choir stalls. We do not sit. We chant the psalms, the sound of our voices rising together, the baritones and the tenors merging, fills the vaulted ceiling. It is a physical sensation, the vibration of the chant resonating in the chest cavity. It shakes loose the tension of the writing. Deus in adiutorium meum intend. O God, come to my assistance. After the office, we process to the refectory. It is time for prandium, the main meal of the day. The refectory is a long, high-ceilinged hall. It smells of wood smoke, boiled beans, and stale bread. We wash our hands at the lavabo, a stone basin near the entrance. The water is freezing, piped in from the cisterns that catch the rain. Cleanliness is mandatory before touching food, just as it is before touching the Eucharist. We stand behind the long wooden tables. The abbot stands at the high table. He blesses the food. We sit. There is absolutely no talking. The rule of silence is absolute during the meal, so that we may feed our souls while we feed our bodies. I look at the food before me. It is simple, yet my stomach clenches with anticipation. We have fasted since last night. There is a trencher of bread, a thick, stale slice of dark rye used as a plate. On top of it sits a ladleful of bean stew. The beans are broad beans, cooked until they are a thick, gray mush, flavored with onions and savory herbs from the garden. Beside it is a portion of fish. As we are on the coast, surrounded by the sea, fish is our staple. Today it is salted cod, soaked to remove the brine, and then boiled. It is white and flaky, dressed with a little mustard sauce. There is a wooden cup of weak ale. The water here is not always safe, and the ale provides sustenance. I pick up my spoon. It is made of boxwood, worn smooth by years of use. I eat the beans first. They are warm and filling, the texture soft and grainy. The taste is earthy, the onions providing a sharp sweetness. I chew slowly. Gluttony is a sin. We must not eat like beasts. While we eat, the lector climbs the pulpit on the side wall. He opens a great book and begins to read. Today, he is reading from the dialogues of Saint Gregory. His voice is clear and projected, bouncing off the stone walls. And the man of God, knowing that he could not be hidden from the eyes of the Lord. I break off a piece of the cod. It is salty, chewy. The mustard clears my sinuses. I use a piece of the dark bread to wipe the juice of the fish from the trencher. The bread is hard. I have to gnaw at it. It tastes of rye and yeast. I need the salt. I catch the eye of the cellarer down the table. I cannot speak. I raise my hand and make a circle with my thumb and forefinger, then mimic a sprinkling motion. It is the sign for salt. He nods and slides the wooden salt cellar down the table. The sounds of the refectory are specific. The clatter of wooden spoons on wooden bowls, the tearing of bread, the wet sound of chewing, and the droning voice of the lector. No laughter, no conversation, just the machinery of survival. When the meal is finished, we do not linger. We gather the crumbs from the table with our knives. Nothing is wasted. The crumbs are collected in baskets for the poor or the poultry. We rise for grace. Then we file out. We are granted a brief period now, the meridiana, a short rest before the work of the afternoon begins. I step out into the cloister garden. The transition from the dim, smoky refectory to the outdoors is blinding. The midday sun is high and fierce. The wind on the Mont is eternal. It whips my habit around my legs, snapping the heavy wool cloth. I walk to the edge of the ramparts. The tide is coming in. This is the defining rhythm of our lives, even more than the bells. The sea here does not creep, it rushes. The bay is a vast, flat expanse of glistening mud and quicksand. The incoming water races across it like a galloping horse. I can hear it before I see it, a low, menacing roar, like a distant landslide. I lean over the stone parapet. The air smells intensely of brine, rotting seaweed, and wet sand. Below, the gray water swirls and eddies, filling the channels, cutting off the island from the mainland. We are isolated again, a fortress of God in a sea of chaos. Seagulls scream overhead, diving and fighting in the updrafts. Their cries are harsh and mournful. I see a group of pilgrims on the far shore, tiny specks retreating from the advancing water. They will not cross today. We are alone. I rub my right hand, massaging the cramp between my thumb and forefinger. The ink is stained deep into the callus on my middle finger, a permanent mark of my station. My eyes sting from the strain of the gold work. I see Brother Odo, the infirmarian, walking through the herb garden. He is checking the sage and the hyssop. I approach him. I need a poultice for the chilblains on my toes, which have begun to swell and itch in the damp cold of the scriptorium. I catch his eye. I point to my foot. I make the sign for sickness, placing my hand on my chest, and then the sign for herb, rubbing my thumb and fingers together as if crumbling a dried leaf. He nods, his face weathering into a brief, sympathetic smile. He signals later, after none, by pointing to the position of the sun. I nod and bow my head. The bell rings again. One single, sharp note. The rest is over. The silence of the scriptorium awaits. The gold is laid, but the text is unfinished. I turn my back on the sea, on the wind, and on the light of the open sky, and walk back into the shadows to write the words of God until the light fails. The bell for nones has long since faded into the salt-heavy air, and the brief respite of the midday meal is a distant memory. Now begins the longest stretch of the day, the afternoon sitting. The great stone room of the scriptorium, perched high atop the rock of the mount, feels less like a sanctuary of God and more like a cold press designed to squeeze the life out of men to produce the holy word. My back is the first thing to betray me. It is a dull, grinding ache centered just between the shoulder blades, a distinct knot of pain that monks call the scribe's burden. We sit on hard wooden benches with no backs, leaning over angled desks that seem to pull our spines into the shape of question marks. I shift my weight from one hip to the other, the coarse wool of my habit bunching uncomfortably against the wood. The straw beneath my feet, meant to insulate us from the freezing stone floor, has been matted down to a thin, useless layer. The cold of the granite seeps up through the leather soles of my shoes, climbing my shins like a slow-rising tide. I dip the quill. The ink is thick today. The air in the scriptorium is damp, fed by the sea that surrounds us, and it plays havoc with the mixtures. I am using iron gall ink, a concoction of oak galls crushed and fermented in rainwater, mixed with vitriol and gum arabic. When it flows from the nib, it is a pale, ghostly gray. Only as it dries and bites into the skin of the calf, the vellum, does it darken to that imperious, permanent black. I have to trust the flow. I have to trust that the gray line I see now will be legible in 500 years. My task for this afternoon is not the simple copying of text, which allows the mind to wander while the hand obeys the rhythm of the alphabet. Today I am illuminating. I am working on the capital Q for the opening of the Gospel of Luke in a new missal commissioned by the abbot. The letter must be a vessel of glory. It must shine with the light of heaven, even here in this gray room. But the work is agonizingly slow. I reach for the pumice stone. The patch of vellum where the gold will lay feels slightly greasy to the touch, likely a remnant of the animal's natural oils that the parchment maker failed to scrape away. If I do not abrade it, the gold will not stick. I rub the stone in small, circular motions, the sound like a mouse scratching behind a wainscot. The dust rises, dry and chalky, coating the back of my throat. I blow it away gently. Next comes the gesso. This is the base upon which the gold will sit, raising it up from the page so that it might catch the candlelight. I have mixed the plaster with a little pink bowl, a red clay that will give the gold a warm inner glow. I load a fine brush made of squirrel hair and lay the drop of pink plaster onto the curve of the letter. It must be high enough to create a cushion, but flat enough to hold the metal. I wait. This is the drag of the afternoon. The waiting. The plaster must dry to a perfect tackiness. If it is too wet, the gold sinks and drowns. If it is too dry, the gold flakes away like dead skin. I stare at the pink curve, watching the sheen of moisture evaporate. Around me, the room is filled with the sounds of industry, though no one speaks. Silence is the rule, broken only by the necessities of the craft. To my left, Brother Thomas is scraping a mistake from a page. The sound of his curved knife rasping against the vellum is setting my teeth on edge. Scrape, scrape, scrape. He pressed too hard, and the ink bled. Now he must remove the top layer of the skin, reducing the parchment to a terrifying thinness. I can hear him breathing through his nose, a sharp, frustrated wheeze. To my right, young novice Julian is grinding pigment. He is working the pestle into the mortar, crushing lapis lazuli for the blue of the Virgin's robe. The rhythm is hypnotic. Grind, turn, grind, turn. The stone jar rings with a dull, hollow tone. The smell of the scriptorium is a dense layering of these activities. The metallic tang of the ink, the earthy smell of the bowl, the sour odor of the glaire, the rotten egg whites used to bind the pigments, and the overarching stench of unwashed wool and human bodies. We bathe rarely. In the winter, the cold makes it a penance. In the summer, the sweat makes it futile. Now, in the damp of autumn, we simply smell like wet dogs. I test the gesso with the back of my knuckle. It is cool and tacky. It is time. This is the moment that requires every ounce of focus I possess. I open the small leather book that holds the gold leaf. The metal has been beaten so thin that it is lighter than air. It is not a solid thing anymore. It is a breath of yellow light captured in a physical form. If I sneeze, if I sigh, if the door opens and creates a draft, the gold will lift and fly away, crumbling into useless dust. I pick up the gilder's knife. I do not touch the gold with my fingers. The oil on my skin would tarnish it instantly. Instead, I use the static of the knife blade to lift a square of the leaf. It flutters, agitated, fighting the air. I hold my breath. My chest tightens. The beat of my own heart feels like a hammer against my ribs, threatening to shake my hand. I lean forward. My nose is inches from the parchment. I exhale fully, emptying my lungs so that I will not need to breathe for a few moments. I bring the knife down. With a gentle puff of air from my pursed lips, a controlled, warm breath, I activate the tackiness of the plaster one last time. Then I flip the gold onto the pink curve. It lands. It wrinkles slightly. Panic flares in my gut, hot and sudden. A wrinkle in the gold is a disaster. It ruins the mirror finish. Quickly, before the size sets, I take a soft rabbit's foot and press straight down. I do not rub. I press. I am forcing the metal into the clay, marrying them together. I lift the rabbit's foot. The gold is flat. It is dull, matte, looking like mustard powder. It does not shine yet. That comes later with the burnishing. But it is down, and it is whole. I finally inhale. The air rushes into my starved lungs, smelling of dust and vinegar. My shoulders drop an inch. The tension releases, replaced instantly by the return of the dull ache in my spine. I look up toward the windows. The light is changing. When we began after nones, the sun was high enough to cast a sharp, white light across the desks. Now, as the afternoon wears on, the sun is dipping toward the horizon of the sea. The light is turning amber, then gray. It is becoming blind man's light. The shadows in the corners of the room are lengthening, stretching out like fingers to claim the workspace. This is the enemy of the scribe. As the light fails, the eyes must work harder. I feel the strain behind my eyes, a throbbing pressure. We are forbidden to bring candles near the manuscripts for fear of fire and dripping tallow. We must chase the daylight. I shift my stool, dragging it closer to the window slit. The stone scrapes loudly against the floor, a harsh roar in the quiet room. Brother Thomas looks up from his scraping, his eyes red-rimmed and watery. He gives a small nod, acknowledging the struggle. He, too, is chasing the light. I pick up the burnisher. It is a long wooden handle, tipped with the tooth of a dog. The enamel of the tooth is harder and smoother than any metal tool we can forge. I begin to rub the dull gold. This is the physical labor. I must apply pressure, significant pressure, to polish the metal. I rub back and forth, listening for the squeak. It is a high-pitched sound, like a mouse in distress. Squeak, squeak, squeak. If it does not squeak, it is not polishing. My wrist begins to burn. The repetitive motion travels up my forearm, settling into the elbow. This is how men lose the use of their hands. I have seen old monks whose hands are locked into permanent claws, unable to hold a spoon, let alone a quill. I flex my fingers, feeling the joints pop. The cold makes them stiff. I tuck my hand into the opposite sleeve of my habit for a moment, seeking the warmth of my armpit, trying to thaw the numbness in my fingertips. The wind outside is picking up. I can hear it whistling around the stone towers of the abbey, a mournful, hollow sound. It buffets the wooden shutters. The atmosphere in the room grows heavy. We are all tired. The spiritual fervor of the morning has evaporated, leaving only the grind of duty. I look at the page again. The gold is gleaming now. It catches the dying light from the window and throws it back with a fierce defiance. It is a small victory, but the letter is not finished. Now I must outline it. I mix a drop of vermilion. The red pigment is heavy, made from cinnabar. It is toxic if swallowed, so I am careful not to lick the tip of my brush to point it, a habit hard to break. I dip the finest brush I have. My hand shakes. Just a tremor. Fatigue. I close my eyes. I recite a silent prayer, not for salvation, but for steadiness. Manus me, service day. My hand, servant of God. I open my eyes and draw the line. The red paint flows alongside the gold, defining the edge, making the letter pop from the page. It requires a surgeon's precision. If I touch the gold with the wet paint, it will run and ruin the gilding. I am walking a tightrope. The room is getting darker. The gray of the sea sky is bleeding into the room. The scribe 3 desks down, Brother Anselm, finally lays down his quill. He cannot see well enough to continue. He crosses his arms on the desk and rests his forehead on them. He is not sleeping. He is surrendering to the limits of his body. I envy him, but I have an inch of border left to paint. The social dynamic of the room shifts as the light dies. The strict discipline relaxes by a fraction. There is a collective sensing of the end. We are like oxen sensing the unyoking. Glances are exchanged, a subtle communication of eyebrows and small sighs. Novice Julian drops the pestle. It clatters loudly against the mortar. The prior, seated at the high desk at the front, clears his throat. It is a warning sound, dry and sharp like cracking parchment. The noise stops. Julian freezes, his face flushing red even in the dim light. We do not look at him. but we feel his shame. To be clumsy is to be unworthy. To waste the silence is to insult the work. I finish the red line. It is straight. It is true. I sit back, and my spine cracks audibly. The pain is a hot band across my lower back. My eyes feel gritty, as if someone has thrown sand into them. I look at my hands. They are stained with ink and chalk, the fingers crooked, the nails rimmed with black. These are not the hands of a nobleman, soft and white. These are the tools of the trade, as worn and battered as the dog-tooth burnisher. The light is almost gone now. The scriptorium is submerged in a twilight gloom. It is impossible to mix colors accurately. The blue of the lapis lazuli looks black. The vermilion looks like dried blood. It is time to stop. To continue now would be to invite the demon Titavillus, the collector of scribal errors, to guide my hand. I begin the ritual of closing down. This is as important as the work itself. I wipe the nib of the quill with a scrap of linen. If the ink dries in the shaft, the quill is ruined. I cork the ink horn tightly. The air here will dry it to a sludge overnight if I am careless. I wash the brushes in a small bowl of water, watching the red and pink clouds swirl and vanish. I take a heavy sheet of linen and lay it gently over the manuscript. This is the shroud. It protects the vellum from dust, from rats, from the damp night air. I place a lead weight on top to keep the page from curling. Around me, 20 other men are doing the same. The rustle of cloth, the clinking of stoppers, the shifting of wood. It is the sound of a machine powering down. Then it comes. The bell, deep, resonant, booming from the tower above us. It vibrates through the stone floor, traveling up through the soles of my shoes. The bell for vespers. The relief is physical. It washes over me like warm water. The long drag is over. The workday is done. We are no longer scribes, judged by the straightness of our lines. We are monks again, called to prayer. I stand up. My legs are stiff, and I have to grab the edge of the desk to steady myself. The blood rushes back into my lower limbs, bringing a prickly sensation of pins and needles. I look at Brother Thomas. He is rubbing his eyes with the heels of his hands. He looks at me and offers a weary, tight-lipped smile. It is a smile of shared suffering, of camaraderie in the trenches of the ink war. The light was poor today, he whispers, barely audible. Tomorrow will be brighter, I whisper back. We fall into line. The hierarchy reasserts itself. The elders first, then the scribes, then the novices. We file out of the scriptorium, leaving the smell of ink and the cold stone behind. We move toward the chapel, where the candles will be lit, and the darkness will be held at bay not by gold leaf, but by song. My stomach growls, loud and demanding. echoing the emptiness of the stone corridor. I ignore it. First the soul, then the body. But as we walk, I am already thinking of the pottage that awaits us after prayers. I can almost taste the warm, salty broth. But for now, my hands are empty. The quill is down. The ache in my back is a familiar companion, a reminder of the day's offering to God. I pull my hood up against the draft of the cloister, tuck my stained hands into my sleeves, and walk into the gathering night. The iron bell in the tower above strikes the air, a heavy, resonant vibration that I feel in my teeth before I hear it with my ears. It is the signal for vespers. My hand cramps, the fingers locking into the claw shape they have held for the last 4 hours. I carefully place the goosequill pen onto the wooden rest, ensuring the wet ink at the tip does not touch the oak of my desk. The sunlight has long since abandoned the high arch of the scriptorium window, leaving only the gray, watery gloom of twilight to filter through the glass. My eyes burn. The dust of the parchment, the chalky scent of pounce, and the metallic tang of iron gall ink hangs stagnant in the room. I stand, and my knees pop, a sound like dry twigs snapping. I smooth the front of my black wool habit. It is coarse against my skin, heavy and damp from the sea air that permeates every stone of Mont-Saint-Michel. Around me, 20 other brothers are performing the same silent ritual. We close our inkhorns, capping them with wax or cork. We cover the precious sheets of vellum with linen cloths to protect them from the dust and the damp night air. The vellum is calfskin, scraped so thin it is almost translucent, and it reacts to the humidity of the island. If we leave it exposed, it will buckle and warp, ruining weeks of labor. We file out of the scriptorium in order of seniority. The stone corridor is freezing. The abbey clings to the rock, suspended between the sky and the sea, and the wind here is a constant, living presence. It howls through the arrow loops, carrying the smell of salt and low-tide mud. We walk with our hands tucked into our opposite sleeves, heads bowed, eyes fixed on the heels of the brother in front of us. Entering the church for vespers, the darkness is profound. The only light comes from the sanctuary lamps. Near the altar, small pinpricks of fire, reflected in the gold of the crucifix. The stone floor creates a deep cold that seeps through the leather soles of my sandals and into my bones. This is the chill of the grave, the chill of centuries. We take our places in the choir stalls. The wood of the misericord is polished smooth by generations of habits sliding against it. The chanting begins. It is not a performance. It is a machine of prayer. A low, rhythmic rumble of male voices merging into one tone. We recite the Psalms from memory. The sound rises into the vaulted ceiling, mingling with the smoke of frankincense that still lingers from the morning mass. I taste the incense on the back of my throat. It is acrid and sweet, masking the smell of unwashed bodies and damp wool. My stomach growls, a hollow, twisting sensation. We have not eaten since the midday meal, and the labor of the scribe consumes energy just as surely as the labor of the mason. After the final Amen, we process out of the church and toward the refectory. The silence is absolute. The rule of Saint Benedict forbids unnecessary speech, and in the evening, the prohibition is strict. We communicate only when necessary, and even then, we use the silent language of signs. A finger to the lip for silence, a hand miming the lifting of a cup for drink. The refectory is a long, cavernous hall with a vaulted ceiling that echoes the scrape of sandals. Long wooden tables line the walls. We stand at our places until the abbot blesses the food. We sit. The meal is simple. Tonight, it is pottage, a thick stew of broad beans, onions, and herbs grown in the lower gardens, served with a hunk of dark rye bread and a portion of cheese. The bread is dense and heavy. I have to tear at it with my teeth. It tastes of the earth and the stone oven. The cheese is sharp, made from the milk of the sheep that graze on the salt marshes below the mount. The salt in the grass flavors the milk, giving the cheese a brine that stings the tongue. There is no conversation. The only voice belongs to the reader in the pulpit, a young novice whose voice wavers slightly as he reads from the lives of the fathers. He struggles with the Latin pronunciation of a particularly difficult passage. I keep my eyes on my wooden bowl, spooning the pottage into my mouth. The beans are mealy, but hot. The warmth spreads through my chest, chasing away the chill of the church. We drink weak ale from earthenware cups. The water on the island is brackish and unsafe, so the ale is a necessity. It is sour and flat, but it cuts the dust of the scriptorium from my throat. I finish my bread, using the last crust to wipe the wooden bowl clean. Nothing is wasted. To waste food is to steal from the poor. When the abbot rings a small handbell, we stand in unison. The meal is over. Most of the brothers will now have a brief period of personal time before Compline, usually spent in the cloister reading or meditating. But I have received a dispensation. The abbot has commissioned a psalter for a wealthy patron, a duke in Normandy, and the deadline approaches. The gold leaf must be applied. I do not go to the cloister. Instead, I return to the scriptorium. It is forbidden to work by candlelight for fear of fire. But for this commission, an exception has been made. I enter the room, now a cavern of shadows. I strike a spark with flint and steal into a small box of tinder, blowing gently until the orange glow catches. I light a taper, and from the taper, I light the oil lamp on my desk. It is a clay lamp filled with olive oil, which burns cleaner with an animal fat tallow. Tallow smoke is greasy and black. It would ruin the colors of the illumination. I sit back down at my desk. The circle of light is small, illuminating only my hands and the square of vellum before me. The rest of the room disappears into the dark. I can hear the wind battering the glass, a chaotic drumming against the order of the room. Tonight, I am gilding the capital letter B. It is the Beatus Ver, the opening of the Psalms. The letter is already drawn in lead print, a faint gray skeleton waiting to be fleshed out. I open a small clamshell that serves as my mixing pot. Inside is the gesso, a pinkish paste made from plaster, white lead, and a little sugar to make it hygroscopic, water-attracting. I take a fine brush made of squirrel hair, dip it into the gesso, and carefully paint the raised areas of the letter. I must build it up, layer by layer, letting it dry in between. This gives the gold a three-dimensional cushion to rest upon. While the gesso settles, I prepare the gold. I open a small leather book. Between the pages lie leaves of gold, beaten so thin that if I were to breathe too hard, they would fly away and disintegrate into dust. The gold is hypnotic. It catches the flicker of the oil lamp and throws it back with a warm, divine luster. I pick up my gilder's knife, a flat, square blade. I cut a tiny rectangle of gold leaf on a leather cushion. I cannot touch the gold with my fingers. The oils in my skin would tarnish it instantly. Now comes the delicate part. I lean over the vellum. I exhale warm breath onto the dried gesso. The moisture in my breath reactivates the sugar in the paste, making it tacky. Quickly, before the moisture evaporates, I use a flat brush called a tip to lift the gold leaf and lay it gently over the pink paste. It looks rough, crinkled, and dull. This is the nature of the material. It must be disciplined. I take a burnisher, a tool with a long handle, tipped with a smooth, polished tooth of a dog. I rub the dog's tooth over the gold leaf. I apply pressure, burnishing the metal against the gesso cushion. As I rub, the gold transforms. The wrinkles vanish. The dullness flares into a brilliant, mirror-like shine. It looks like solid, molten metal poured onto the page. The light from my lamp dances in the curve of the B. This is not decoration. This is theology. The light of God, captured in metal, illuminating the holy word. My eyes strain in the dim light. I have to squint to see the edges of the letter. I work for an hour, perhaps two. The silence of the scriptorium at night is different from the day. In the day, there is the scratching of 20 pens, the shuffling of feet. At night, there is only the hiss of the oil lamp and the sound of the sea below. I am alone with the saints. My back aches with a dull, throbbing pain between the shoulder blades. This is the scribe's burden. As the poet wrote, 3 fingers hold the pen, but the whole body toils. I move on to the colors. I have a shell containing ultramarine, the most precious of all pigments. It is made from lapis lazuli, ground from stones brought from the mountains beyond the sea, far to the east. It costs more than its weight in gold. I mix it with a little glare, egg whites, that I whipped into a froth and let stand until they turned to liquid. The smell is faintly sulfurous. I paint the background of the initial. The blue is deep, profound, like the sky at the very edge of night. I must apply it evenly. If it pools, it will crack. If it is too thin, it will look streaky. My hand must be steady. I hold my breath as the brush touches the vellum, releasing it only when the stroke is complete. A draft catches the flame of my lamp, and shadows jump wildly across the page. I freeze, brush hovering. Fire is the enemy. A single mistake, a tipped lamp, and the work of months, the work of God, would be ash. I wait for the flame to steady. The bell tolls again. Compline, the final office of the day. I clean my brushes immediately. The egg binder dries hard and insoluble. If I leave it in the delicate hairs of the brush, the tool will be ruined. I wash them in a jar of water, then reshape the tips with my lips, tasting the bitter, metallic residue of the paint. I cover the manuscript with a heavy woolen cloth and weight it down with lead bars to prevent curling. I blow out the lamp. The darkness rushes in, absolute and heavy. I navigate the corridor by touch and memory, my hand trailing along the cold, rough limestone of the wall. I know every uneven block, every turn. I join the other brothers as they file into the church for the last time today. Compline is brief. It is the prayer for protection through the night. The abbot sprinkles us with holy water. We chant the Nunc Dimittis, Lord. Now let your servant depart in peace. The chant is softer now, a lullaby for the soul. The energy of the day has bled away, leaving only exhaustion. After the final prayer, the great silence begins. From this moment until after prime the next morning, no word may be spoken for any reason. We pull our hoods up over our heads, retreating into our own private worlds of contemplation. We leave the church and climb the stairs to the dormitory. It is a vast, open room running the length of the building. There are no private cells here, just rows of straw mattresses laid out on the floor, separated by low wooden partitions that offer no soundproofing, only a visual barrier. The room smells of straw, old wool, and sleeping men. It is freezing. There is no fire in the dormitory. The heat of the day has risen and vanished, leaving the stone to radiate the cold of the rock beneath us. I go to my pallet. By the light of a single lantern hanging by the door, I prepare for sleep. I do not undress fully. The rule dictates we sleep in our habits, ready to rise immediately for Matins at 2 in the morning. I remove only my belt and my sandals. My feet are pale and calloused, the skin cracked from the cold. I rub them briefly to bring back some feeling. I check my mattress. I fluff the straw, trying to break up the clumps that have formed where my hips dig in. The straw is old. It breaks into dust that makes me sneeze. I must remember to ask the cellarer for fresh straw next week. I lie down. The wool of the blanket is scratchy against my face, but it traps the heat of my body. I pull it up to my chin. I cross my hands over my chest. The darkness is total now. The lantern by the door has been extinguished. Lying there, I can hear the breathing of the 50 other men in the room. Some snore with a wet, rattling sound. Others breathe in long, slow whistles. A brother a few pallets down coughs. A dry, hacking cough that echoes in the rafters. The dampness of the abbey settles into the lungs and stays there. But beneath the human sounds, there is the eternal sound of the mount. The tide is coming in. I can hear the roar of the water rushing over the mudflats, surrounding us, cutting us off from the world of men. We are an island again. The sound is rhythmic, a massive hydraulic breathing. In and out. My mind replays the stroke of the brush on the gold leaf, the way the light caught the curve of the bean. I worry if the glare was too thick. Will the paint crack when the page is turned? I push the thought away. It is done. The day is done. I recite the Jesus prayer silently, timing it with my heartbeat. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. My body feels heavy, sinking into the straw. The pain in my fingers dulls to a throb. The cold stone floor beneath the mattress saps the heat from my back. But I am too tired to care. The boundary between prayer and sleep blurs. The chanting of the sea grows louder, then softer, then becomes nothing at all. I close my eyes, and the darkness takes me.